I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Monroe County Redevelopment Commission on Wednesday, September 20th,
There he is.
2023. And Jeff, would you call the roll?
Yes. Commissioner Martin.
Present.
Commissioner Shelton.
Here.
Commissioner McCarty.
Here.
Commissioner Kiesling.
Here.
Commissioner Cassidy.
Here. Present.
And I talked to Commissioner Tucker, and he is unable to make it tonight because he has a...
I just got a text that said the link was not functioning on
What's that?
the link was not functioning on the,
Oh, really? Is it now,
Zoom.
do you think?
Yeah.
They may not have started it soon enough. 'Cause it's
Cass,
supposed
did you
to
hear
start
that?
6.
or TSD, I guess.
Okay.
You can see everybody, can you? Yes, you can, right?
Well, I'm going to assume, since the label says it's recording, that this meeting will be recorded. It would be available electronically in either event. And as we talked about before this meeting, the county council does need this meeting room tonight. So I would say, let's proceed. And I guess if Jim Shelton's participating via Zoom, it's got to be working somewhere.
okay.
Okay.
Well, the link, I just used the link on the calendar and it worked great.
Oh,
Okay.
Perfect. Link on the Monroe County calendar?
Yes.
Okay.
I wonder if
Okay. All right. That takes care of our first item. Jeff, next item is a residential TIF discussion, and you sent us a short email, and I imagine you've got more to tell us.
Well, a little bit more. I don't have a whole lot of detail as to location or anything at this point, but I guess at the last meeting of the county council and county commissioners where they discussed ARPA,
What's ARPA?
ARPA is the American Rescue Plan Act fund. It is funding that the county received from the federal government. The county received 28 to 29 million in that kind of funding, and it can be used for a variety of purposes. One of the things that the county council and the county commissioner said is, if we gave you a $3.5 million budget for a housing project, what would that look like? And, what would, essentially bring us back a plan of attack and action based upon that kind of budgetary work. And so the county had just looked at a lot of different properties about where we're going to put our county jail. So we kind of had a list of potential larger sites. And so we are trying to infill that with maybe some smaller sites, because talking to Paul Satterley, you're looking at $2 million to build a quarter-mile road. And so, trying to figure out how to get that stretched to a project where we're subsidizing either infrastructure or land or both is kind of what I'm working on.
Okay.
But I think part of that conversation to me because we've been talking about residential TIF quite a bit, is, assuming that we find something and it actually gets going, does it make sense to make that a residential TIF? Does it make sense to look at utilizing the TIF revenues for maybe some of the more non-traditional things, like if the infrastructure costs are covered, looking at maybe housing down payment assistance or maintenance and repair assistance for people who use that, assuming that it's going to be a lower income area. And so, those kind of things, I kind of wanted to bring it up, let you guys kind of hear that request. And if you have questions, I'll answer what I can. Otherwise, I think, food for thought. I don't think I'm going to announce anytime before your next meeting, oh, we found a spot, here's where we're going, and here's how we're going to do it. That's not the timeline I think is reasonable, but I might get lucky, right?
Okay.
So, go ahead, Richard.
One of the reasons that little worksheet that I showed you earlier, I started thinking about how we would combine some kind of TIF district bond with a grant like this to come up with enough funds to do something meaningful. And because the income from residential properties is so low, it sets a very low cap on what we would be able to borrow,
Right.
especially with the current rates. And so it would seem to make sense to kind of pair this with something that would generate a little more TIF revenue, like some kind of commercial part of the TIF area, so that we had something that generated a little more revenue than we would get out of single family or even rental housing. To make sure that we had, that the threshold we were able to borrow was high enough that we could actually do something meaningful. As you said, roads are really expensive, sewering is expensive, so that I think it's almost going to make it imperative that we've got some kind of mixed area to make this work. And the other aspect of it is we would like to get the housing in as fast as possible. So it's almost like you're going to have a plan for a development of this type where you're going to put in 15, 20, 30 houses, whatever it is. They're going to have to go up in a hurry to start getting revenue coming in very quickly.
Mhm.
So those are the kind of parameters I was thinking about as once you had sent the email, I started checking my head again.
And I guess one of the struggles with that is if we look at our current TIF districts, the Curry Profile TIF district is got debt and it's only 2 parcels, so that one probably wouldn't qualify. Our West Side TIF district, I think for the next couple years, we're really looking at a cash flow being fairly
Right.
close. Fairly close. You look at the State Road 46 corridor, again, we issued that bond based upon, with the current financial outlook being, we're not going to quite have enough to cover the bond payments. And then the Fullerton Pike TIF is, we just pledged half the revenue, but also understanding that the major source of revenue in that TIF district is likely to, or is not likely, but it is, there's some risks there associated with
Right.
that hospital going not for profit. So in my mind, it's going to be hard to pair that within one of our current TIF districts,
Right.
right? So what you would be thinking of is if we had a new district that we knew some type of commercial was going to go into in a fairly short period of time, then exploring it that way would make some sense.
So when you say that, Jeff, you're talking about the possible creation of an additional new TIF in a geographic area, of which this $3.5 million would either be allocated to a land cost, an infrastructure cost, or assistance for something if it was.
In my mind, due to the ARPA and the federal guidelines, that money has to be obligated by 2024. It has to be spent by 2026. So I don't think that $3.5 million is necessarily appropriate to use as kind of assistance for kind of the maintenance and repair or the down payment assistance. I think that money would have to be there for capital expenditures, either in land or the roadway. And I'm wondering if we then made that a TIF district, then maybe 5-10 years down the road, there might be enough increment to do some of these other programmings with. I think
Right.
it's going to take, I think this is a kind of a longer view of how we're going to utilize the TIF revenue, because that budget would have to be spent by the end of 26, and we'd have to have a pretty good knowledge base and contracts out by the end of 2024.
So this is end of 2024?
Yes, the end of
Okay.
2024 is when we'd have to have it obligated,
We've
which
got a 15-month window in order to identify, close, and have things spent, or identified prior to.
identified and have things far enough along the process to have contracts out to spend whatever.
Right. And that $3.5 million allocated from ARPA, apportioned by the commissioners and approved by the council.
That needs to happen. Basically what they said is, here's a rough budget, come show us what you can do with it.
Oh, okay.
Right, so it's, again, we're pretty early in the process.
Right. The only thing we've identified is what the dollar amount would be if everything moves forward in the proper form.
And I think what the council, the commissioners naturally want to see is what's
Sure.
the bang for the buck, right? If I came back and said, $3.5 million will buy you a 3-lot subdivision with 3 homes, it's probably not gonna work. I think, it has to be something that would be much more impactful and meaningful than that.
Right.
In fact, impactful and cost effective, so that we house people as quickly as possible at the lowest cost.
Right.
I thought pardon me for interrupting, Richard. I thought I heard some people from the city talking about doing some low cost housing, but also using a TIF management. Any of you heard any of that? It was in the last week or so. I saw John Soda yesterday and I forgot to ask him about it. I'll go back and do that.
Well, I'm aware of what the city is doing is that they
Yes,
have,
please tell us.
and it's not a TIF district because I've actually met with the gentleman. They're doing a land trust in the northern
That's right.
part of the city where I think there's 20 or so lots that has been given to the trust. The infrastructure's been put in place, and so the trust is building the homes and then going through a process to make sure that the homes go to someone who needs affordable housing, someone who qualifies for their programs. And I think their program is below 1.2 times the area median income. And so I've met with them and I've talked with them about what they're doing there. It seems pretty good, pretty exciting, right? It's building that. It's kind of, but they did not utilize a TIF. I actually asked them, well, why didn't you? Because there's fees associated with the trust, and then part of that, what that trust does is the trust would actually continue to own the land, and then but the house would be owned by the person, and then when it gets sold, there are restrictions on who can buy it, and then there's a cost share as to what the proceeds from the sale of that home would go to. The person would, unless the market dips, of course, but I think the thought was the person would always at least recoup their investment plus a percentage of the equity that they built in it. But it'd all be based upon what someone who hits their income guidelines would be able to afford. And then,
So does the trust have a longevity like the trust down at Thompson? The trust is gone. I was there when it was established and they said it's no longer in existence. Is that true of this new one?
I think my understanding, and again, I've had one meeting with them. I
Okay.
don't know all the ins and outs, but my understanding is that it would be more of a perpetual trust where
Okay.
they would keep that as a affordable housing in perpetuity, and that the trust would continue to own the land until it
However long.
dissolved, and then I don't know what would
No
happen.
different than an RDC that utilizes a 99-year lease type situation.
I can't hear you.
Oh, a situation, as you said, Iris, when we established a trust previously down off Rockport Road, where then it was
Yeah.
dissolved because it was not able to be continually,
Well, I was there when we established it and I thought there was longevity with it, but somehow it did
Yeah.
not matter that way, go that way.
it had been dissolved, and I do believe there's 1 or 2 lots
That's
left
right.
in there that are
Yeah.
still into the land trust
Right,
that is
right.
managed by, forgive
The
me.
city?
The city, but it was handed over to, I do believe, Restorations Bloomington R.
Okay.
BRI. Now, again, that is my memory at the present moment, but given the situation we're looking at on the perpetuity aspect, that area that you're referring to was granted, and they
Right,
haven't
oh, I know.
established anything that is set up in a TIF manner in any
Okay,
capacity.
because it was right with the whole Thompson dissolution. That was part of the agreement that would be available as a trust and set up for housing that would be more or less affordable. And some of the houses are kind of neat, actually.
But that area you're talking about, when we're discussing what we're talking about in the county aspect, the primary objective is to make sure that perpetuity is able to be
Yes.
be able to provide it without a question, but be able to allow the owners to build some equity as they move forward, because otherwise it's similar to a
Doesn't
rental.
make
And at that
sense.
point,
Yeah.
and the other point, as we look at this $3.5 million, when we look at it, is how do we leverage either through a CDFI or one of our financial partners to ensure that the mortgages can be bought and sold with able to have the percentage amount of income down that the people making the below AMI have. And that is part of the problem that we run into in our land trusts and such, is that the financial institutions
Right.
take pause in regards to it because they're not able to resell them on the secondary market, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac as
Right.
easily. So when we look at doing these, we have to take into consideration the financial model of how we're going to house people that'll be able to build their equity and also build their community
Right.
care so that those residences don't fall into disrepair and they
Right.
continue to build the property equity.
And I would, part of my response to that is the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, I forget which one, maybe both, they have riders that now will accompany a mortgage that are in these land trusts, so that they are marketable now and that they'll accept those.
We have a guest in our audience who's shaking her head yes, but I don't know who it is.
Yeah, I think there is, yeah.
I stand corrected. Great.
Was there any information about what type of housing they were looking for? Is this
Yes.
single family,
I think
duplex?
I think they're looking for single-family homes.
Okay.
Hey, Jeff, if I may interrupt, what entity does the county have that would manage such a thing? Who would be evaluating the people's applications and deciding if they qualify or not? And then, you know, if you did decide to use the Thompson property, since the county owns it, there's no property tax coming in. So I don't see how that's an option at all. But the thing that concerns me is what entity in the county would manage this?
I think we're still working on that. I think our first priority was to try to find a place for it. And again, I've had a conversation with the land trust. I've had a conversation with a couple other developer types. You know, I guess given the budget, I think we need to look at, you know, where can we build it and where can we get it built for an affordable price, and then determine what is the best mechanism. I think there are some in the county commissioners and the county council who really like the land trust ideas because of the perpetuation in nature of them. I think there are some that think, but then the homeowner isn't building the same kind of equity they would under a much more market, and that maybe we should just be looking at trying to get that initial home price and have some kind of time limited restriction, 5-10 years, and then you know, so somebody doesn't buy it day one and turn around and sell it day two and reap the subsidy we gave to that property. So I think there are a lot of open questions for that. I guess at this point I'm still trying to explore, is it even feasible to get land and infrastructure and have it where it makes sense that it would be developed. That's kind of my step one. I think step two is developing that, but I think step one may help get to step two if we're talking about if we're partnering with somebody or who we're partnering with, if they have any. Because part of what I want to make totally clear is that I don't think there's anybody in the county who thinks that we should be in charge of building homes, managing that process, other than, you know, making sure, doing what we can to make sure it's affordable housing, right? We're not developers, we're not real estate developers, we're not home builders. And somebody asked that I step out for a second, so
Okay.
if you guys can continue and
Yes, we'll continue. All right, thank you. Any other comments about this issue?
Richard, do you mind to have this lady introduce herself and
Yeah.
Oh,
and make a
yeah.
Yeah, she
comment?
can
We
come
have
up
a
maybe.
guest.
Yeah, would you mind
That'd
joining
be helpful.
us? And-
I was invited to sit up here, so I'll come
Good.
Absolutely.
closer.
Come on up.
It's a little hard to hear back there.
I know. So, introduce yourself.
So I'm Wendy Goodlett. I am president and CEO of Habitat for Humanity in Monroe County.
Okay, very
Okay.
good. Welcome.
Thank you.
I just wanted you to shake your head, and I thought, well, we need to get you there.
Continuing on that light, when we look at this from a homeownership, I mean, you know, being with Habitat, you have extensive experience in regards to longevity of.
Randy, would you speak into the mic? I
Sorry.
can hardly hear you.
Given the fact you're with Habitat, you've
Yeah.
got long-term experience in regards to, not land trust per se,
But
the-
longevity of the
longe-
affordable
on the
homeownership.
Yeah.
So the way that Habitat, so we already have all of this infrastructure in place that Jeff's talking about from a, you know, how are you going to vet applications for homeowners? I think one piece of it that's really important is if you're talking about that income level, also providing education, which we do, so that they're prepared to be homeowners and are financially ready to be homeowners. The other really important piece of it is that for every Habitat home we build, Habitat has the right of first refusal on that house for the term of their mortgage. So if they're in a 30-year mortgage, we have right of first refusal for the 30 years that they're in it. So if for some reason they want to leave Monroe County, they want to just downsize, whatever it is, we have the opportunity to buy that house back, which our board has said we will do in every circumstance as long as the cash flow allows, because it's less expensive for us to house the next family in a house that we've already built than it is to buy land infrastructure and build a new home. So there is, you know, our average mortgages are definitely, we have very few 15-year. Most of them are 20 to 30. And then if we put another Habitat homeowner in it who meets the income criteria that you've been talking about, that clock resets. And we'll have the right of first refusal on that mortgage. So in essence, unless they pay off their mortgage with us, at which point in time I think they should be able to reap the benefits, that will continue being affordable for the next family if it's through the Habitat program. I think the other key piece is the financing. Because if you're talking about 60 to 80% AMI, they're not going to get the same rate that several of us would get on a mortgage. And so I have concerns about that, I think, because we finance the mortgages. And we do it at 0%, which keeps it super affordable. I think it's gonna be hard to find affordable financing for families on these homes. So, sorry, you stepped out and they opened a can of worms.
No, that's all part of the conversation, right?
Yeah.
And I guess from a perspective of the Redevelopment Commission, I guess the question for you guys is, should we look at maybe having a TIF district so it could be part of the conversation, that you could get some revenue to maybe do some of these things to help ameliorate some of the issues? Or is this something that, because with the budget, I don't expect it to be a several hundred unit subdivision, right? I think it'll be much smaller. You know, my greatest dream is we could probably get something with 40 or 50 houses in it, right? That would be, in my mind, a pretty optimistic outlook. So, you know.
So from our perspective, what we have is the bonding authority. So if this kind of project is not really feasible for $3.5 million, which it sounds like it's probably not, is there a level at which we could get involved as a TIF to generate revenue through a bond that would make it possible to do this
Right.
in such a way that we could actually get the bond paid for by the tax revenue over the course of the TIF? I mean, that seems to be the equation that would get us involved in this.
I guess I could see two different ways. One is the way you talked about, in which case it would probably have to be structured with us working with the developer who would be willing to back that lending, right? I think that's one way. And I think, and I'm not positive on this, I haven't read their memo in a while, but I think I forwarded you all with a memo from, I think it was Barnes and Thornburg, about what these new laws meant, because they just changed a lot of the
I'm just going to
residential
say, there's a
TIF.
whole bunch of changes.
But I thought that included the ability to maybe do much more, in my mind, a kind of a pay-as-you-go to help offset some of these other barriers for people who are looking to buy a house, such as down payment assistance, such as, repair assistance in those districts. Again, I guess for the public who is watching this now or may watch this later, I mean, one of the founding reasons we have redevelopment commissions from the get-go is that it was supposed to erase urban blight, right? So, if you're looking at this in a neighborhood that has low property values because of the properties haven't been maintained or for whatever reason, making that a residential TIF and then utilizing that funding to help do the repairs there makes a lot of sense from that context. Like from the context of how I'm starting, which is we need to have new housing as opposed to rehabilitating currently used housing. That theory doesn't always jump out and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. But if you think about it from how the redevelopment statute started, it was much more of we have a blighted area of town X, and we want the local government wants to be able to utilize the taxes produced by their improvements to pay for those improvements to benefit that area as a redevelopment.
When we look at that, Jeff, from that standpoint, two questions in regards to it. One, does ARPA rules constrain us in such a way that we have to be very careful how we go through this, or do they give us a little bit of a wider range?
ARPA rules are constraining, yes, right? They are. There's a ton of federal requirements.
Okay.
And honestly, it changes depending on what we actually spend the money on.
Okay.
Like I can tell you right now, if this was a pure infrastructure project, it would be much easier to navigate the ARPA funding than it is if it's an infrastructure plus buying a land project, right?
Okay.
So, and I think with I'll use Habitat as an example. The county has pledged $1.7 million to pay for the infrastructure for Osage Place.
Okay.
Right? That was easy. That was easy to get through the labyrinth that is the ARPA reporting guidelines. I think once you add that land component to it, it makes it a lot more difficult because typically the federal government wants their grantees, if they buy land or really pretty much any capital item, typically they want them to own it, and if they ever get rid of it, to give the Treasury the ability to take that asset if they choose. So it becomes a lot more complicated. It involves looking at current federal programs and making sure this program would qualify under their guidelines, because then I think then the rules are different. But it's
Complicated.
it gets really complicated, and it makes it so we have to be really careful with how we do that. And so we've got a fairly broad level understanding of what those guidelines are. And so as we get closer to a project, we'll need to structure it so it hits one of those classifications.
And as we look at these areas that we have, based on what Powell Satterley and our infrastructure costs of a quarter mile of road, do we look at these particular areas that already have the existing infrastructure in them at the present moment that just maybe need some increase, some care and love? Whether they already had existing sidewalks that need repair, they've already got sewer systems, and then we look at that areas, as you said, from the original intent of the redevelopment commissions, to pick out the areas that may have dilapidated some that we can build up a better tax rate from and encourage that development in our county.
Well, I guess I want to be fairly clear that when I talked with the council and the commissioners about the ARPA funding, I think they are looking at adding new housing stock to the community.
Okay.
So that's kind of, that from a redevelopment perspective, that makes a lot of sense. I think from the overarching, we need to add housing stock, and we need to especially have add housing stock that is one that is affordable,
Right.
that kind of rehab doesn't make as much sense. I can tell you, we are funding some of that through ARPA as well, right? I think there are appropriations in the county to have residential rehabilitation dollars that we're working on putting a plan through. Also, we're partnered with United Way in the Heading Home project, and that includes a significant amount of funding for renovating current housing stock that is not necessarily habitable at this point in time to make it habitable. So we're working on those in kind of a different fashion than this. Mostly, probably a lot because of the existing housing stock that needs that is much more, not as much of it's in the county. So it doesn't make sense to look at a county TIF district because, you know, we're not in that game. That would have to go through the city's.
Right, we still have to be in the outlying in the county area, but as we look at these areas and just be quite frank about it, where we look at the areas that are in the county, that are near the city, that still have existing infrastructure in them, that have not been developed in a way, and I'll utilize Osage as a particular portion of it, because as we get out in that area, there's areas that are in the county, but they still have connectivity to the public infrastructure.
We are certainly looking at properties where the sewer line and the water line are adjacent to it, and they would need to be extended into it.
Right, that really constrains the search enormously.
Constrains the search, but it also gives us the ability to be able to have more affordable and number of residents due to those public services already being existing.
I don't think, I guess my understanding of the guidelines, and I don't think it was ever expressly stated, but my understanding is that anything that we do, we want it on sewer because we've got money in our ARPA plan to help people replace their septic systems too. We're working on that because we know that that's an issue, right? And so, and it's one of those issues that, at least from my perspective, is that, you know, if you put a septic system, it is going to fail.
Yeah, just a matter of when.
It's a matter of when, and then when it does fail, how easy is it to know that it failed, right? Because, you know, there are failing systems.
It gets pretty obvious.
Well, after a period of time, but you know.
I also don't think you can fit septic on quarter-acre lots.
No,
you can't.
you need at least an acre.
And that's the side, as we look at these, when we try to expand our dollars for the maximum amount, we're looking at a density issue.
Yes.
Well, putting in sewer is an investment in the future.
Oh,
because it
yeah,
is
health, yeah.
in so many
It's
ways better than it not. And a lot of people haven't
Okay,
realized that.
so your plan is you're working with people in the county government to try and identify possible locations.
And
Okay,
our-
is there anything in particular you need from us
I don't think
to help that process go along?
I don't think I need anything from you. I would say if you drive by a spot and you think that would be a great spot, feel free to let me know. But I've had a lot of that through a lot of different projects that we were working on recently. So I think in my mind I've got like 3 or 4 different things I really want to look at a lot closer, and I want to talk to people who are in the business of building things. I've got a meeting with someone next Friday. I still need to reach out to Habitat because you know, they're obviously one of the people who know this area as well. But I wanted to make sure you guys were aware that this was going on, because I think there is a opportunity to kind of utilize, or to at least look at utilizing TIF in a little bit different way than what we have in the past. That really goes hand in hand with what we've been talking about for the last 2 years, right? In my mind, and it's something that will have to if it's going to happen, we're going to know it's going to happen in a relatively short period of time, right? If I don't have a suggestion to the council and the commissioners in the next month or 2, and at the longest by the end of the year, I don't see how it's going to happen, right? So it's one of those that, in my mind, it's kind of on a fast track, and so I want to make sure we dot all our i's and cross all our t's.
Sure.
Part
Yes.
of what we could look at is a TIF area and potentially a public-private partnership in regards to, as we've seen in the past, developing area that will be able to support any bond issue that we would have to issue on that.
And I guess, I think the bond issue, we shouldn't necessarily write off.
Right.
But I think we know how to do bond issues. We know
Right.
how to get that organized. It's some of these other, it's not a bond issue, but would it be worth it? Because again, I'm not sure we're going to have the density to support a bond without a developer backing. And so if in the next month, if the solution is figured out that it involves a developer and getting a developer back bond, then I think that's an easy conversation to have with you guys. I think you guys all understand how that works and how that, if that doesn't happen and we go maybe a different route, whether there's still a role that you guys want to play in it. I think that's kind of why I wanted to make sure this was discussed tonight.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Wendy, for
All
coming.
right, good luck.
I'm sure we will be in touch.
I hope so.
Well, thanks for being here. We appreciate
Yeah,
that.
of course.
Okay. Next item are the minutes. There are two sets of minutes. We will take where's the other set?
It's July and August.
We will take
or
the
what?
July minutes first. We have, I need a motion to approve the minutes of the July 19th meeting of the Monroe County Redevelopment Commission.
I do have a
I move
correction.
to approve the, excuse me, go ahead.
We have a second?
I'll second. I read through both of them, and I think I hit where I thought there might be some issues, but I
I do have
didn't find it with that one. I only found it with the claims the second time.
a correction on the July 19th. I was out of town at that time, so I was not present at the meeting. I did catch up online, but we were out of town on vacation at that point. So,
You did view the meeting online?
yes.
Okay.
So it means you can vote for the minutes?
Okay. We
Technically,
have
it was
a motion and a
absent.
second to approve the minutes for July 19. All in favor? Oh, you got to
Aye.
read the roll.
The roll.
Commissioner Martin,
Yes.
Commissioner Shelton,
Yes,
Commissioner McCarty,
Yes.
Commissioner Keesling,
Yes.
Commissioner Cassidy.
Yes.
Motion is approved, 5-0.
Okay. And then we have the minutes for August 16th. Entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes for August 16th. You want to call the roll?
Commissioner Martin,
I abstain. I was not at the meeting and I have not viewed it.
Commissioner Shelton,
yes,
Commissioner McCarty,
Yes.
Commissioner Keesling,
Yes.
Commissioner Cassidy.
Yes.
Motion is approved, 4-0 to 1.
Okay. Thank you, folks. Next up are claims. We have a claims totaling $13,223.26, consisting of items that are mostly legal. We have a Deckard land surveying for $15.90. We have Yasmin Stump for, what's it, $8,438.78 and $25.27.50. There's a slight correction to our STEM allocation of $267. And then there's an Old Wealth management fee of $400 to do. Do I have a motion to approve the claims?
I'll move. So what are we doing with the STEM correction? Is that what the 270 is? 267? Is that the correction?
I'm sorry?
What's the correction for the STEM?
There was a difference in
Yeah.
however the calculation was done. It was off by $267.
Okay.
That's
So this is what we now have to pay out.
Right.
pay in addition. Okay, that's what I wasn't sure.
I approve the payment of 13,200, I'm sorry, I second the approval of 13,223.26.
Thank you,
Okay.
Steve.
We have a motion and a second. Would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Martin,
Yes.
Commissioner Sheldon,
Yes.
Commissioner McCarty,
Yes.
Commissioner Kiesling,
Yes.
Commissioner Cassidy.
Yes.
Motion is approved, 5-0.
Okay. And
Nice to get through some of the paperwork.
I've got one started here. Sir. All right. Anybody in the public here to comment?
I think she
Anybody
left.
remotely to comment? No one? So we are up to staff comment.
I'll keep my comments brief. I just want to let you know that Lisa Ridge is out of the office this week. That's why she's not here. I have talked to her about at the last meeting, we talked about the need to figure out the Curry profile,
Right.
reconstruction, phasing and cost. Paul Satterley's working on that. He has not completed that yet, so we're kind of still in process on that. I know Lisa generally gives you a nice, huge summary of all the nice things that we've done, and I don't have that information, so I think I'll just leave it for her for next month.
Okay. What do you know about Hunter Valley? Doesn't seem like anything's happening.
Nothing seems to be happening there this year. Well, you're closer to that than I am.
Nothing's happening. So what's our status there?
My understanding, and I will confirm this with Steve Kreider, is that they were waiting on some permits from DNR for the bridge.
Right, but I think that was several months ago that we heard that. And are we still waiting on DNR?
I will ask, I do not know.
Okay.
My understanding in regards to is it is in the DNR and the local floodway review at the present moment. And that happens to come through a secondary thing where I was dealing with some floodway issues. And that was one of the cues that they were doing on a local basis.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it is in a permit review process
Okay.
as of approximately 30 days ago.
Okay. All right.
So I will confirm that with him and let
Right.
him know, but that was my understanding, and
Okay.
I am a little surprised that it's still going on.
Yes, it shouldn't be taking this long.
No.
Well, it may get complicated by the fact that there's the EPA site that actually drains through that.
True.
culvert. That may be a complication. Okay. That's staff comment, commissioner's comment. Iris, any comments?
Not right now.
Okay.
I'm glad
Paul?
we keep moving along.
Hey, good conversation. I think we're making progress on residential TIF. Now, whatever comes out of it, that's great. I'll keep an eye open as I as I drive along. One thought I had was, wouldn't it? I know there was mention of access to public transit, and I think that it actually limits the area surrounding Bloomington, because in my mind, you also have opportunity, perhaps, in the unincorporated communities like Unionville, Harrodsburg, Smithville, even in the Crooksville area. But those are transportation issues. I understand it. But it would be good infill opportunities, I think, down the line, maybe for something else. But no, I appreciate the input from Wendy. That was very helpful as well. So,
Sorry, I didn't see.
thanks, Jeff.
Just to expedite, no comments from me, thank you.
All right. Randy?
I'm good. Are we still moving forward on the sunrise greeting?
On what?
Sunrise greeting.
Yep.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
It's quite entertaining to read through the bill from Yasmin, see just the machinations they have been going through.
Haven't read that invoice. You got to read it.
It is.
I did.
I would just point, and I'm just looking at the claims. The Deckard land surveying is part of that.
Right.
Yeah.
I understood that.
And then
We're moving forward is
Yes.
my comment.
We're,
in regards
we're,
to
we're
this.
trying to get it squared away. I think there was there's an information gap that they're trying to bridge. I also think that we just had a fundamental factual issue that I think's been resolved. So,
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Just wanted to double check on that. And then regarding the residential TIF and the ARPA money, it's greatly appreciated the way you're bringing things forward to try to make things happen. Appreciate it very much.
Okay, I have no comments. I appreciated the discussion on the residential TIF. I think we have been looking at this for a long time.
We have.
This is a good opportunity to see if we can't push it forward.
yeah. And I appreciate that you guys not taking this as kind of a curveball from where we're going, but I just think that this one may happen rather quickly, and I want to make sure that you guys are aware of it before, and I don't give it to you all at once at one meeting and say, hey, you guys ready for this?
We're gonna have 2 special meetings and have to approve it in the 3rd.
Yeah.
Appreciate that very much.
Okay. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We are adjourned. Thank you.